$2 an hour. That's what it costs to make the most powerful artificial intelligence on Earth feel safe. In a quiet office in Nairobi, a small group of people spent their days reading the worst things human beings have ever written. Descriptions of child abuse, of torture, of suicide, labeling them one by one so that a machine could learn to look away. You have used that machine. You asked it something, and it answered, calm, helpful, careful. And when you pushed it somewhere dark, it refused. It felt like magic, a machine with manners. But a machine does not know where the line is. Someone has to teach it. Someone has to stand in the dark and describe what's there. This is the story of those people. The ones who absorbed the horror so the rest of us would never have to. Paid $2 an hour, and then forgotten. None of it was hidden. It was published, in plain sight, and almost no one looked up from the clean answer long enough to ask who wrote it. Start where everyone meant well, because everyone here meant well. OpenAI was founded on one of the most generous sentences in the history of technology. Its mission, to ensure that artificial general intelligence, the most powerful tool humanity might ever build, benefits all of humanity. Not some of it, all of it. That was the promise. A company that would carry the future carefully, so it didn't crush anyone on the way. And the other company in this story began the same way. Sama, an outsourcing firm built around an idea that sounds almost too good. The idea was this: there is dignified digital work in the modern economy, labeling data, training algorithms, and that work could be sent deliberately to people in the developing world who had been locked out of it. Not charity, jobs, real jobs with paychecks for people in Nairobi, in places where a steady office wage could change a family's life. Lift people out of poverty by giving them a seat in the digital economy. Both of these are sincere. That matters. This is not a story about cartoon villains scheming in a tower. It's a story about two genuinely good intentions, meeting in a room. A company that wanted to make AI safe for everyone. A company that wanted to give good jobs to people who needed them. You should like them both. Hold on to that feeling. Because every step from here was reasonable, and that is exactly the problem. Here is the problem OpenAI had to solve. A large language model learns by reading, and to be useful, it has to read almost everything. Vast stretches of the open internet, scraped and poured into the machine. But the open internet is not clean. It contains the best of us, and it contains the worst of us. Racism, violence, sexual abuse. The model absorbs all of it without flinching, because it has no idea what any of it means. Earlier attempts at this had failed in public, badly. Chatbots that turned hateful within hours of meeting the world. So, OpenAI faced a question with only one real answer. How do you teach a machine to refuse the unspeakable? You cannot just tell it to be good. The machine doesn't know what bad is. The only way to build a filter that recognizes horror is to show it horror. Thousands of examples, each one read by a human being, identified, categorized, and labeled. This is the unspeakable thing about safety. To protect millions of people from the worst of the internet, someone has to read the worst of the internet first. The cleaner you want the output to be, the more filth somebody has to wade through to get there. And in November 2021, to do that wading, OpenAI turned to Sama. On paper, the deal was unremarkable, a specialized data labeling project. Workers in Nairobi would read text passages and sort them into categories. The categories had clinical names. Behind those names were descriptions of child sexual abuse, bestiality, murder, suicide, torture, self-harm, and incest, written out in graphic detail. The pay according to documents and worker interviews obtained by time. Entry-level data trainers earned around 21,000 Kenyan shillings a month, about $170, which works out, take home, to roughly $1.32 an hour, rising toward $2 for more senior work. Sama would later say the real range was higher, $1.46 to $3.74 after taxes. Sama said workers were asked to label 70 passages per 9-hour shift. The workers said the real number could reach 250. And OpenAI's position? OpenAI said it set no productivity targets at all, that Sama was responsible for the pay and for the workers' mental health. Read that carefully, because every single party here did the reasonable thing. OpenAI outsourced a job it couldn't do in-house to a firm whose entire purpose was doing exactly this. Sama took on work it had done before, for a client building something important. The workers took a steady office job in a hard economy, each decision on its own defensible. And buried in the fine print no one reads was the cost that never appeared on any invoice. The dollar figure was never the real price. The real price was what reading 250 descriptions of the worst things humans does to a person. And nobody put that on the contract. And it worked. That's the part that's hard to sit with. It worked beautifully. The labels came back, tens of thousands of human judgments. This is abuse, this is violence, this is self-harm, fed into a system that learned to recognize the patterns. A toxicity classifier, a filter, built from human labor, woven directly into the model. The machine learned to flag harm, to deflect, to refuse, to stay clean. And in late 2022, OpenAI released it to the world, ChatGPT, and the world lost its mind. Here finally was the helpful, harmless miracle. A machine you could ask anything that answered like a thoughtful colleague and politely declined to help you do harm. Within weeks, it was the fastest growing application in history. The cleanest, kindest face artificial intelligence had ever shown the public. Everyone marveled at how safe it felt, how responsible, how careful. And the filter that made it feel that way, the thing everyone was praising, was built line by line from passages that a small group of people in Nairobi read with their own eyes and could never unsee. So, step into the room. 9-hour shifts, a screen, a queue of text that never empties. And the work is simple, in the way that the worst work is always simple. You read a passage, you decide what kind of horror it is. You tag it. You move to the next one. Passage after passage, a child, an animal, a body, a method, over and over, all day, every day. There is no narrative arc to it, no moment where it resolves. There is only the next one in the queue. One worker described a single passage he could not get out of his head, a specific recurring description that returned to him at night, that he kept seeing whether his eyes were open or closed. He had read so many that they had stopped being separate things. They had merged into one continuous wound. The workers had been promised support, wellness counseling, a place to put the weight down. But all 4 workers interviewed by Time said the same thing. The sessions were rare, pushed by productivity. And when they came, they were group sessions, a room of traumatized people, together, instead of the private therapy they'd expected. You do not heal a wound like this in a circle of strangers on a lunch break. And so, the weight came home with them. They described themselves as mentally scarred. One detail sits at the center of this whole story, quiet and devastating. Workers who went home at the end of a shift and could not look at their own families the same way. A man who held his child differently because of what he'd spent the day reading about other people's children. That is the part that doesn't fit on an invoice. That is the price. Then, in February 2022, it ended. Not gently. OpenAI had asked Sama for help on a separate project, collecting graphic images. During that pilot, workers gathered material in the most extreme category of all. Something went wrong. Sama ended the image work immediately and gave notice it would cancel the rest of its OpenAI contracts. 8 months early, and just like that, the project was over. The workers were left with exactly 2 things: the income, gone, and the images. Those they got to keep forever. On January 18, 2023, Time published the investigation. The headline did the work plainly: the $2 an hour workers who made ChatGPT safer. The reporter, Billy Perigo, named the contract, the categories, the pay, the trauma. It was all there, and it connected to a larger fight already underway in Nairobi's courts. Daniel Motong, a former content moderator, diagnosed with severe PTSD, had become the face of a legal reckoning. His lawyer, Mercy Mutmi, working with the NGO Foxglove, pressed cases that argued these workers were owed care and dignity and the right to organize. Around 185 former moderators brought a class action seeking nearly 26 billion Kenyan shillings in damages. Kenyan courts ruled repeatedly that these tech giants could be sued in Kenya at all. And Sama, the company that began with such a good idea, announced it would quit graphic content work entirely, all of it, including a separate $3.9 million contract moderating content for Facebook. Now, hold two facts next to each other. In the same season that the world fell in love with ChatGPT's clean, careful answers, the people who made those answers clean were being told their work no longer existed. The wage stayed at $2, and the market they served kept climbing. The AI data labeling business, valued in the billions, projected to keep doubling. The cost of making the machine safe went down. The value of the machine went up. The people in between stayed exactly where they were. And this was never just one office. The same pipeline runs through Manila, through remote tasks and platforms like it, where workers are classified as contractors with no guaranteed pay, paid by the task, dropped without notice when a project ends. The geography changes, the arrangement does not. The contradiction was always the whole design. A machine built to spare millions of people from trauma, paid a handful of people $2 an hour to absorb it instead. It's tempting to call this a scandal. One company, one contractor, one bad outcome. Name it, condemn it, close the tab. But that's too easy, because this wasn't a glitch in how AI gets made. This is how AI gets made. Every model that feels safe, every system that politely refuses, every clean and careful answer you have ever received from a machine, somewhere underneath it is a layer like this one. A person in a room reading the things you will never have to read. You used the tool. You admired how responsible it felt. And you never once thought to ask who paid for that feeling or in what currency. So, ask it now. The next time the answer arrives, measured, helpful, calm, and the machine declines to show you something terrible, remember that it learned that gesture from someone who saw it so that you wouldn't. It was always there, in plain sight, the whole time. You just never looked up from the clean answer long enough to ask who wrote it.